Game loaded.
Hi, and welcome to another edition of Lessons Learned with your host, Rafael Pinero. I gotta wonder, why is it that people defend bad AAA game industry practices? I can understand the people in the AAA industry defending those practices. What I don't understand is when consumers, also call themselves fans, defend these practices, particularly microtransactions. Anytime somebody talks about microtransactions, you always hear the same defenses. And I'm not going to talk about the defenses themselves. They're, being debated ad nauseum. I want to understand why they do that. What motivates them? I put the question to the Jinquisition Facebook fan page and people there, and they gave me a couple of answers. I put some answers in a survey and they added some others. I narrowed it to 4 of them. The first one, they, being people who defend microtransactions, enjoy a product, therefore any attack on the developer or the implementation of that product is seen as a direct attack on them. Now, I've discussed the idea of ownership with my friend Chapelmont on our podcast. It's every Friday on Twitch under Lessons Learned 1, all one word, including the letter 1. And we discussed this in a sense of when you become a fan and you interact with a product, you tend to develop a sense of ownership. And your self-identity becomes attached to that product and being a fan of that product and being a member of that fandom. So regardless of the nature of the critique, and by the way, the word critique itself is not negative, although in popular culture it's seen as negative, but the definition itself is neutral. Any critique that may appear to be negative, not even actual negative critique, lends itself to a staunch defense, right? I like this game. How dare you say anything negative about this game? The problem is that many people who are criticizing microtransactions, like myself, are doing it to get a better game, right? So we're on your side, fans. You're defending against a non-existent attack. This is a critique and criticism of the industry and industry practices, not of the fandom or even of the object itself, except the fact that it has this feature that is not really a part of the central core features of the game. So there's that. Second, people think that microtransactions benefit them in some way. I've heard often that microtransactions are good because if you don't have time to play the game, then you can pay to sort of move along, right? As a shortcut. Well, first of all, I'm sorry to say this, but if you don't have time to play the game, then why are you playing this game, right? If it's so time-consuming, maybe you should sort of space it out, right? You don't have to finish the game all at once in an hour or two, just cram 20, 30, 40, 50 hours of gameplay in a couple of days, right? Not only that, the reality is when you talk about how microtransactions interact with the actual gaming public, people who pay money, the people actually pay the most money, the whales, the so-called otters, O-T-T-E-R, the dolphins. These are terms for people who spend an inordinate amount of time playing the game, are so heavily invested in the game that they want to have every advantage and want to be immersed in it. They'll buy all the DLC, they'll buy all the merchandise, and they'll buy everything. And microtransactions are designed and geared to their taste and to manipulate them into spending an inordinate amount of money. Think of it in this way. For example, why is it that EA, every time they release a Sims game, the first release is just a bare bones sort of graphic upgrade of the same Sims you have played for ages, right? And then slowly but surely they drip feed you features like, oh, you can have kids and pets and a pool and new hairstyles. If you add up all the pieces of DLC that they throw in the latest version of Sims, the overall cost is in the hundreds of dollars. Only people that are so invested in The Sims that they want to keep playing it forever and ever are the people who want all these features and will spend the money. Everyone else will play it, have a good time, and then move on, right? It's also, I think, one of the reasons why you're seeing an increasing war on modding, especially modding in single player. People talk about balance and all these issues, at least people in the industry, but the fact of the matter is, the reason why modding has now become inconvenient, it's because it's much easier to sell the features like clothing and environments and all that to the player, and they will pay, at least a certain population will pay, anywhere between 5 to 15% of the population will pay an inordinate amount of money for it, rather than them getting it for free from a mod site like Nexus Mods, right? But if I can get it for free, why should I pay, right? So you're not really getting a lot of benefit from it. And again, if you need the shortcut, then maybe you should get another game. I'm sorry, I know that sounds cruel and judgmental, but it's the truth. You really don't, you just admitted that you don't have time to play this game. So you're willing to spend more money for a game that you're not really playing. And we also know that the people that play the game the most are the people who spend all the money. So they're the people who actually spend the most time and money on the game because they're the most invested. Another excuse I've heard is, should I say defense, is they think they're supporting the developers, even though the money goes directly to publishers. Most games that have microtransactions are AAA games, and the microtransactions are essentially a device installed or ordered to by the publisher. You know, people with the money, the people that write the checks, people who pay the salaries for the developers, not the developers. Leave it to the developers and they'll probably give you a pure game. Why would they spend resources and time, part of their precious budget, to do something that has nothing really to do with the game itself? And some people say, well, it doesn't have a real impact on the game mechanically, ergo why spend the time? Of course not. I mean, they're not going to do that. But the publishers want that sweet microtransaction money. They're the ones ordering it. So you're not supporting the developers. In fact, there's been cases where successful games have been launched, and then a company like Activision has turned around and to the developer and said, "Okay, you're done. We're going to close you down. We're going to hand this game, the IP, to some other studio that we have in our gigantic roster of developers, right? We're going to do that. We're going to hand them over to them, and well, you're done." You're like, but why? Why would you do that? Because they can. So you're not really supporting the developers. And I think finally, and this is one that was voted the least, but to me is the one that resonates the most. And I think there's a fundamental, especially when it comes to video games, there's a fundamental fear that if you don't support the game, right, through microtransactions, you don't supposedly support developers, the games are going to disappear, right? And that not only covers microtransactions, it covers every single screw you tactic, money grubbing tactic of the industry. You have to do it. It's just the way things are. You have to do it. Otherwise, video games are going to disappear. My type of video game is going to disappear. Look at what happened with Hitman and the last Hitman. That Hitman, the resources spent on it were not as great as the past Hitman games, and it got chopped to pieces so they could get more money. But people said, well, I'm going to still support it. I'm still going to buy the game and I buy all the chapters, even though I don't like this, because otherwise I don't get another Hitman game. Here's the thing. The Hitman games are not going to disappear. Maybe the actual Hitman game may cease to be, but the genre is not going to disappear. Other people are going to pick up the mantle. We had horror games, survival horror games that supposedly were not making money. All of a sudden, other people in the indie space and now in the increasing AA space, they picked up those games and made games of their own. It's like, and then the AAA industry saying, oh yeah, you can actually make money. You can make money in the way you can make in another game, so you can still make money. This is still profitable. And now we're seeing an increase in using horror elements and even publishing horror games. They're still very much in the indie space and the AA space, but they're very much there. Space combat scenes were supposed to have disappeared. Hey, we have Elite Dangerous and other games that are coming back. classic World War II and World War I FPS as well. Even now, Call of Duty is going back to World War II, and Battlefront went back to World War I. These things are cyclical. They come and go, but they don't disappear. Don't let the fear of your favorite game just being gone manipulate you, because that's what they're doing. These tactics are extremely manipulative, and your acquiescence, you are playing along on that manipulation. Think about this. Does any of this truly add to your gaming experience? Are you getting more bang for your buck, euro or pound or dollar, right? Dollar and buck essentially being the same thing, at least in the United States. Are you getting the best game possible? Let me clue you in something that I saw in Super Bonnie Hop's channel the other day, and I will link to it below. Companies like Activision are making a lot of money, but they're not making more money by making more games or even better games. No, they're cutting back on game production, even though their games are extremely successful, and they're focusing on microtransactions and on games that have this formula of giving you less for far more. They're getting their profits from subverting taxing laws in the United States and in Europe and across the world by putting the bulk of their earnings into tax havens. And the difference, of course, when they repatriate the money, they get a big chunk of money out there. They can just take that money and use it for whatever. That's where their profits are coming out. They're not coming from your money, from your dollars, really. And they're not delivering good products out of them. You know, they're cheating the American taxpayer because they're not paying their fair taxes. You know, the countries in which they make the bulk of their sales. Taxes that probably you are paying, but they're not paying. And you're not getting a better product. So next time your fingers rush to the keyboard to defend your favorite game against these vile critics that just want to destroy and hate everything about the video game industry, consider the fact that the video game industry doesn't really care. And they're perfectly willing to manipulate you in every single way and shape possible just to get that more extra buck. And not only that, like I said, all these things are cyclical. What is now perfectly sustainable today may not be sustainable tomorrow. And that, you know, when people get tired of microtransactions, when the AA industry smartens up and opens up and gives players other options, they'll move away from these practices because they'll realize that the games are not going to go away, that they can still get quality out of their games without paying or putting up with these shenanigans. When that happens, then that might lead to the collapse of this practice and even hurt the AAA industry. And it won't be your fault. It won't be mine. It will be entirely theirs. So, as always, if you like this or any video on my channel, please comment and subscribe. And I'll see you when I see you. Good night.